And welcome back, Fourth and Long fans. It's your footy correspondent, Coach Donnie, has here back with another AFL and State League off-season supporter series. And here we go. Let's get into another chat today. I have Brennan, goes by Berg. Brennan, thank you for joining me today.
Yeah, not a problem. Happy to be here.
Awesome, awesome. So I always like starting my episodes off here, finding a little bit about the person that I'm chatting with. I know this is a footy podcast, but let's stay away from footy for just the tiniest bit. Just a little bit about yourself outside of the game of football.
So programmer, iPhone and iPad apps, mid 30s Australian. I like fishing, football, got a couple kids, which you might hear in the background. And yeah, I like gardening, mad gardener as well. So there you go. There's a bit about me.
All right,
I
great.
suppose another important thing, I live in
Sure.
Adelaide now, but I grew up in the country. So country at heart.
Awesome, awesome. That's fantastic. Country SA.
Yeah, country SA.
Awesome, awesome. All righty. So let's get into it. Let's start with some of the football questions. What's your favorite thing about watching the game of football?
Well, I like how it's always on the go. There's never really a dull moment in footy, even when your team's getting spanked. Individual contests can go any which way. So there's no parking the bus in footy. Teams can't really relax for a second because momentum can just quickly change, and then a team will just pile on the goals. I like that. I like a lot of the little moments. I like crowd moments when like someone's lining up for a set shot, it's a long shot, and you can see it going and it's heading towards the post, and the whole crowd does that. Ooh, like that. I love that sort of stuff. And I love that I like sitting amongst opposition supporters and having back and forth. And the fact that I can do that, and you kind of get respected for doing that, and it's a lot of fun. Yeah, that's some of the stuff that really appeals to me.
Fantastic, fantastic. Let's go into the memory banks a little bit. Can you remember your earliest footy memory?
I can, yes. Interestingly, this came up just the other day. I reckon it was, I can, it's like a vague memory because I reckon it's about 3 or 4 at the time. And it was my nana yelling at the television. And it would have been, I'm pretty sure it was the 1990 SANFL Grand Final was on the telly because my nana is a mad Port Adelaide supporter.
Mhm.
And she was just like, I can just remember a snapshot of her just yelling like something at the telly, like, get off him or get in there or like something like that. And I can remember seeing footy on the telly. That's my earliest memory of
Fantastic.
footy.
That's awesome. I love the nanas loving the footy. That's fantastic. Absolutely love it. So anybody that's watching the YouTube video can see a Guernsey that you're wearing. We'll give away the colors, but let's wait before we go through it. What is the club that we're going to be talking about today, and how is it that you came to be their supporter?
So Glenelg Footy Club is my SANFL side. I guess I came to be a supporter in a sort of a roundabout way. Originally, when I was young, the Crows entered the competition, and everyone was like all the boys at school. We were all young, reception year one, like we were just mad into the Crows. After a couple of years, I know, I was just kind of like, I don't really go for the Crows. Like it's exciting, but I don't. I found myself really drawn to watching the Tigers in the AFL, so Richmond, and there was a lot of my friends also played for a club, Kaibi Bolite, which is where Brisbane Lockie Neal is from. So you might have actually heard of that club. And they wear yellow and black. So there was like, I sort of had that positive vibes around that. And so then I followed Glenelg in the SANFL, I guess, as much as you can do when you live out in the country, watching it when it's on the telly and stuff like that. And then when I moved up to the city, obviously for university, suddenly it was a lot more accessible. So I started going to games. And then when my daughter was born and was a bit older, the first sort of footy experiences were going down to the bay with her. And yeah, just really enjoying the vibe down there. And then from that, I just got more into it. And then yeah, especially when their women's team entered in 2017 as well, really got like heavily into following that with my daughter. So yeah, and it's just
Fan-
grown from there.
Fantastic. That's awesome. So I gotta ask this. I know footy sometimes can be a family thing. So how is the separation of supporters in the family? Mom, dad, or any are
Yeah.
any of them supporters?
Uh,
And then if they're not
yes, they
Glenelg
are.
fans, how's the banter?
So, my I'm kind of lucky in a sense because, as you know, Port Adelaide didn't get into the competition in
Hmm.
when they wanted to get in the early '90s. My mum, like my nana, is a hardcore Port supporter. But then obviously I picked my AFL team, the Tigers. My dad he's a Geelong supporter. Most of the farmers in the western part of Victoria, southeastern part of SA seem to be Geelong supporters.
Hmm.
I don't know why, but kind of non-committal. And both of them just had a rule, and that was once you pick your team, that's your team. You never change, come hell or high water. So I became a Richmond supporter. A couple of years later, Port entered the competition, and then my mum, I think, regretted that rule. But and yeah, so we have great. I go to like pretty much every Tigers Port game with my mum, and when she's up here, if there's a SANFL game on, she'll sometimes come along as well. And now, like my nana, now that I go for Glenelg a lot as well, she also will she'll like keep tabs of the scores, and she's like, oh, they didn't win this weekend, or I see Port got them, or stuff like that. So
Hmm.
yeah, it's really really healthy banter, I guess you would say.
That's that. Hey, that's fantastic. At least it hasn't separated the family because I know I've heard so many stories of children having to pick that their parents' clubs as
Oh,
youngsters
my
and
children
almost
definitely. They've
well
had
I
no choice.
well in my favorite ones are the ones that I hear that I hear the myths whether it's actually true or not is they basically give them the ultimatum is you got to move out of the house if you don't pick our club. And I find that absolutely fascinating. And it's rather relatively cool because there's so many sports teams over here in the States. I mean, you've got so many professional sports, so it's you don't have that almost hardcore banter as much as you do say in Aussie rules. So for me, I find it fascinating. I find it really, really cool that there's this history of banter in the family connections with clubs is absolutely fantastic. So I love that story. Thank you for telling me. So before we go any further, I'm trying to learn. Like I said, I'm trying to learn the state sides as much as I can. So just really, really quickly, could you give me just a real quick history lesson of Glenelg? What type of club is it, and why is it that I should be keeping an eye on the Glenelg Tigers?
Okay, so they are somewhat a new club, I guess. So they were in the 1920s, which is, I mean, that's 30, 40 years after some of the older
Hmm.
clubs. And I mean, they're called the Bays because Glenelg is down on the beach, and their traditional area is right around the bay from Glenelg to Brighton, sort of heading south from there. It's, I guess, it's what you would almost say it's like a reasonably unsuccessful in some respects. They took a while to win their first flag. They've been at a lot of grand finals that they've lost.
Hmm.
Not like Collingwood levels of losing, but that like my first memory of footy, that grand final was Port beating Glenelg again. Um, uh, they've also had some really remarkable achievements. The highest score in, I guess, if you consider professional to mean all of the state league comps in the AFL, Glenelg scored 49 goals, 23 or something against
Holy
Central
snipes.
Districts. Ridiculous score. There was I read that a goal umpire was making a signal for either a goal or a behind every 60 seconds. There was 41 minutes of time on for ferrying the ball back from goals kicked. Yeah,
That is insane.
the final kick of the game hit the post. So that would have been 50 goals, but they hit the post. Um, yeah, it was just some remarkable stuff like that. There's been some really famous names to come out of Glenelg as well. Kernahan was from the Bays and went on to greater things. Yeah, it's they won a flag in 2019, so I was there for that, and that was like another one of those first flags for 30 something years type things. It was very similar to the Richmond story. I was born about 6 months after Glenelg's previous flag before that. So for my whole life, they didn't win anything, but they lost several. It was yeah, it's an interesting club like that. There's a lot of interesting history that I missed out on. Like they used to have the Bay Disco and stuff like that down at Glenelg, and bit of a party atmosphere, things like that. They didn't allegedly like the footy wasn't taken that seriously until sort of the 60s, 70s, stuff like that, where they got whipped into shape a bit more. Um, so yeah, interesting to kind of, and I feel like they don't have any. There's incredibly strong rivalries between like say Port and Norwood, right? Like that's such a well established thing, and even Norwood and Sturt and stuff like that. I feel like Glenelg's almost like a third wheel in a lot of the rivalry stakes, where sort of rivalries come and go, but they're never long lasting. But I guess that's a gut feel from someone who's a more recent fan.
No, it makes sense. In fact, yeah, actually, that was my next question. I said, do you think they have a biggest rival? And if so, who would it be?
Well, I feel like Port could be considered that because I mean they might be Glenelg's biggest rival due to losing many grand finals to them. But the sad thing is, if you ask Port who their biggest rival is, I don't think it'd be Glenelg. Um, there is also some other interesting history there, like after the 1990 grand final, which was the one that happened just after Port had attempted to join the AFL. Graham Corns, who was the coach of Glenelg, basically went into their rooms and said, like, to the effect of, like, good game, guys, and well done for winning, but you don't realize that this is the high point of the SANFL, and you've basically, you know, it's downhill from here because now we're going to have to do a stateside, and that's going to kill the local comp to some extent. Which it did. I mean, obviously, just in terms of draining fans out and stuff. But yeah, so I guess there's a bit of history, but it's more one-sided.
Mm-hmm. No, it makes sense. Unfortunately, so sometimes that happens. So, alrighty, we'll go back to for you a little bit. Can you remember the first ever Glenelg item that you were given or bought?
uh, I can, and this is interesting. So where I grew up in the southeast of SA is part of Glenelg's country recruitment zone. So one of the other memories I have is I remember there was a training program run at our primary school by the by the club, I guess, and where they go to all the schools. And I remember getting a poster that was like a Glenelg poster as well. I actually wonder if I still got it. But it's interesting because obviously at the time I was probably more interested in the AFL
Mm-hmm.
because most kids were at that stage. But I remember having it in the back of my wardrobe somewhere, or inside the door of my wardrobe. Yeah, so that would be the first Glenelg thing I got, and then obviously after that, I think my first beanie, I wasn't able to get a Richmond beanie, but I got a Glenelg beanie. But it was fine for me because it was yellow and black, so that was good enough. But yeah, obviously I've got a lot more recent merch. I can't keep away from the merch stand now, but that would have been my first thing as a kid.
Few more disposable funds, correct?
Yes.
Awesome. I enjoy it. I'm the same way for I like I said, I didn't get into footy until 2009. I'd seen it as a kid on TV. My father was a huge sports person, and so I found it. He There was a channel that we had called Fox Sports World, so we were watching it. I was watching it as a kid. Like most Americans don't have any clue about footy. At 8 years old, I knew what footy was. I didn't know everything about it, but I knew what it was. And so when I actually found the Roosters, the local team here, I was kind of ahead of most people. I knew what it was. I kind of knew how to play. I hadn't played, nor did I know the skills. But so it's with me, like as the years have gone on, I'm much more like I'm getting merch now. I'm buying merch. And then with me, I'm a Sydney Swan supporter. I've found enough mates that are in New South Wales and in Victoria now I'm getting packages all the time from Australia of people sending me stuff,
Yeah,
and it's not,
packages.
and I don't ask for it, and it's one of the things that I find that I absolutely love about the Aussies that I have met is that they're so generous about that. Like I tell them, you don't have to do this, you don't, but they're like, no, mate, you have to. Like I got a snack pack of Aussie snacks just before Christmas that a friend of mine from Tassie who found the podcast sent up to me, and he's like, you have to try these. So I've been snacking on Australian chocolate, uh,
Mm,
barbecued shapes, pizza shapes, twisties, all that type of stuff. I got in the mail. The one thing I haven't done yet, and
nice.
I'm kicking myself, is the Vegemite. I haven't. I'm still a
Mm,
little leery on that. I've had it
a
before.
little bit, just a little
Exactly. I've
bit.
I've had
Yeah.
it before. I've had it before, but I didn't know that rule. And I had it for a grand final party in 2010, and I slathered that on a cracker, and I
Oh,
regretted it.
yeah.
So
That's a classic mistake. That people are
it's
like,
the
oh, so
old
it needs to be like a thick, like jam or chocolate or something like that. And then yeah,
no,
no, no, no, little.
it's almost got to be translucent, everything that I've been told on toast
Yep.
with plenty of butter. It's I'm going
Yes.
to
Oh,
do it.
yes.
I'm a little gun shy. I eventually will.
Yep.
So
Have you had
back
fruit chocks?
say that again.
Have you had fruit chocks?
I have not.
Fruchocs. Oh, all right. Care package will be incoming, my friend. Delicious
Fantastic. I
South
know
Australian treat.
I need to go back because I think there were two or three other ones that I was told that I need to have that were not in that pack. And they were like, mate, you didn't get, I said, I didn't pick this. I said, I had a friend send it to me and he's from Tasmania. I guess this is what he thought. So please don't. I said, trust me. I said, if you want, I'll ask for some more the next time. Like burger rings, I've seen is another one people have talked about that I heard
Yep,
are
they're good.
fantastic. So all right, enough with the Aussie snack section of the podcast, which is absolutely fantastic. We'll jump right back into it. One of my things that I love talking about is I think fandom is one of the coolest things in the world because everybody fans differently. Everybody handles being a fan absolutely differently than everybody else. So I like hearing people describe a little bit. So could you just describe to me your fandom? I mean, how is it like? Are you at every Glenelg game that you can come to? If you can't make it to the game, do you listen to it or watch it on the telly? Like, how is your fandom of the Glenelg Tires?
Oh, yeah. So I go to most games I can. The problem being that I tend to play two games of field hockey a weekend
Mhm.
through winter, and unfortunately, that often clashes with the footy, which is unfortunate. But I'm very lucky that like my wife basically knows winter is for footy and hockey, so I get to go to a lot of games. I buy the season membership with Glenelg that gets me into home and away games because then if they're playing at say Norwood and I've got a game out that side of town of hockey, I'll jump in on my way back or something.
Mhm.
So I go to most games. The SANFL, I'm lucky they have a fantastic app, in my opinion, the SANFL Now one, which is it's like $90 a year subscription, but you get every game, including like the resis and the stuff. And I often get like digs from my hockey friends because I'll go off at half time and like get my phone out and just quickly bring up the game, check the score, yeah, and then go back on and play. See, I'm very dedicated that if I can't get to a game, I'll watch it on their app. And if I miss it, because that I'll just watch the replay. So yeah, I love to sort of interact with it that way. I try to get to all of the women's games that I can get to. They tend to happen in late summer, early autumn, so a bit more accessible for me. And they have a really chilled vibe. The people who are at them, it's like I don't know if you've heard it described. The AFLW, the supporters tend to be very a passionate, sort of close knit group. I feel like the SANFLW, it's even more of that. We had a great game. I think it was last year. It was against the Eagles where it was a scorcher. It was like 36, 37 degrees, and there was
Mhm.
one patch of shade. It was at Richmond Oval, which is West Adelaide's. And basically all of the supporters from both teams were all just sitting under this one patch of shade, all mixed in together. And there was a guy there, and he was a Eagles supporter through and through, had all the
Mhm.
gear, but his daughter, can't remember her surname's Seal. I think it's Jess Seal. Anyway,
Mhm.
she played for Glenelg. So he was alternating between screaming his head off for the Eagles And then when his his daughter or his granddaughter, I think it was, got it, he's like, "Go, Jess, go!" So much fun. I love that.
Awesome.
But yeah, that's my thing. So I like to get down to the games. I like to take the kids down because it's a really good atmosphere. SANFL games. You know, I get in, put the picnic blanket down. They tend to go off. There'll be kids, like there'll just be a little pack of kids, and they just sort of all get
Hmm.
together and run around and play games and climb on things and that sort of stuff. And I watch the footy and have a beer and a pie, and yeah, that's how I do it.
Hey, that sounds fantastic. I absolutely love that. And I 100% agree. Anybody that listens to my podcast knows I'm a huge supporter of women's footy. And I think sometimes the women's footy is much more like there isn't the heated rivalries between the teams as I think the men's competition is, especially in the AFL. I think there's much more interaction and much more like respect. And again, I'm not saying that men's games doesn't have respect, but there's a deeper respect because the passion for the sport, I think, kind of brings people together. So I
Yes,
100% agree
absolutely.
with you. I think the women's fan bases, I think, are much more able to get along. They can intermix, and there's far less issues. The men's can get, especially if you get a little liquid courage into you, any type of alcoholic
There's always a
beverage,
few
sometimes
heroes.
somebody's going to
Yeah.
say something stupid and feelings get hurt or people get angry about something. So I 100% agree with you on that one. So we'll go back again. Like you said, you kind of grew up in country SA, moved to Adelaide, where you got to a lot more access to Glenelg. Can you remember the first Glenelg game you attended live?
Yeah, it was actually in a way they were playing away at Unley Oval, so that's against Sturt, and I was living in a flat that was actually only a couple blocks away from
Mhm.
Unley Oval. And I remember sitting down and just me, me and my mate had just been kicking a footy up in the driveway of the flats. He lived in the flat along from me, and this guy who lived over the fence was this really aggro doctor who didn't like us kicking the footy because we got it on his roof a couple of times. So he had a tanty about it. I was like, "Oh, where do you want to go?" And I remember just looking up my phone. I was like, "Oh, Tigers playing just down the road." So I was like, "Sweet, let's go." So we just jogged down the road and went to the game there. So it's a very ad hoc thing. It wasn't planned at all.
Mhm.
And I reckon I'd only been in Adelaide. That was actually kind of one of those moments. Where it's like, actually, I can just go to footy. Yeah, it's just down the road. It's happening, so I can just go. And then not I went to a few games here and there, but definitely when my daughter was a little bit older and was able to start going, I got to a lot more games because then it became a nice thing to do with her and go out.
Daddy daughter time. Fantastic.
That's it.
Absolutely love it. So, all right, I'm gonna make you do something that sometimes is not always easy. As I say a lot of times, sometimes this is like picking your favorite child as a parent, and I know nobody wants to do it. Favorite Glenelg player of the past and favorite Glenelg player currently on their list.
Okay, so from the past, I have to say, although I never got to see him play, I'm going to say David Bradley, who the reason is because he was the PE teacher at the high school where my parents worked in the
Mhm.
country. And so I would chat a lot to him as a young lad. And his son, actually, Andrew Bradley, is currently playing for Glenelg. And I can remember kicking a football with him in the high school gym when he was about 3 or 4 or something like that. So I'm going to say Dave Bradley because of I guess a almost family connection, and that he has also a lot of ties to the Kaiby Football Club. The whole Bradley family does. Current player, I like watching Liam McBean play the Beanpole. He's quite good, but number one favorite would be Ellie Kellick, who's the captain of the girls team.
Awesome. Awesome. Girls
Yeah.
player. I love it. Fantastic. Fantastic. Absolutely love that. So, alrighty. My favorite one is I love seeing the smile on people's faces when I ask this question because this always brings good memories. Most memorable moment as a Glenelg supporter.
Not even at a game. So I don't know if you know about do you know about the brewery chimney clock, chimney thing that we have with the
Mhm.
SANFL? Yeah. So obviously, the colors go up for the winning team on top and the losing team on the bottom. I have a really good selfie of me and my daughter wearing all our gear, standing just off Port Road with the chimney in the background and the
Mhm.
colors on it. And it's like that moment for me, because every time we used to drive up to visit my nanas from the country, we would drive past the brewery clock, and every year, without fail, it would have some other team's colours on top. Occasionally, Glenelg would be there, always on the bottom. So that, like being able to see the clock, that was fantastic. And the other one is the 2021 SANFLW Grand Final at Debenham Oval. Fantastic game, Bays won, and being able to go out on the ground, because that's another thing that you just don't get that in the AFL. You can't do that anymore. But being able to run out onto the ground when the final siren went and like get around the players as they're celebrating and singing the song and waving the flags and all that, just absolutely fantastic. And you kind of forget that in the AFL, you sort of forget those things that you can't really do anymore, but you can still do in the SANFL.
Awesome. That's magnificent. Absolutely fantastic. So we'll go to the men's season first, and we'll eventually get to the women's, like I said, because I know with your daddy daughter time is definitely something you definitely will remember. So thoughts on Glenelg men's season this last year?
Well, it was an interesting season because we
You made finals. Was it 12
mm,
and 6, I think, if I saw correctly, was the
we
regular season total. So you make finals.
we got in. I didn't. We were on a road trip over the finals period, so I was watching it all via the app.
Oh,
So I
okay.
didn't get to go, which is unfortunate. But it was almost like I didn't have a lot of confidence. I think because of the year before, where
Mhm.
we breezed through the season. We barely lost the game, and then got to the grand final and just did not even fire a shot. And I was actually at my parents' place that weekend, and we got up super early to drive back to get to that grand final. And then they just put up no fight. And so then this last year, I just remember like I wanted to temper my expectations. I didn't want to get too excited because I was like, oh, like, I don't want us to put in another. Yeah, didn't want to. So I tried to temper my expectations this last year. I feel like we'll. I reckon we got a good shot this year. Yeah, I don't know. Last year it felt like we never flicked the switch as well as we could have. I guess. Yeah.
Makes
Uh,
sense.
yeah.
Yeah.
It was a hard season for me, I guess, to get into.
I can understand it. Sometimes some years it's there's still the
Ah,
wounds. So we before we get to next season, I find it
mm.
interesting that I'm so used to the AFL that you have the draft and you have free agency in the trade period. So I know in state sides it's completely different. The turnover is different because of the fact that it isn't full-time professional. Some people are actually pros that are on contract, some aren't. Most or many are kind of shall we say part-time with also full-time jobs. So how do you keep track of their off season? Do you think they've made any moves? Have they brought in any new people in? Have you had any significant losses? Kind of what are your thoughts on their off season?
We got a new coach. That seems to happen every other year. It's a pretty common thing in the SANFL because obviously once a coach does really well, they tend to head up to assistant level at the AFL. Like a
Mhm.
lot of coaches do their apprenticeships here. And I Glenelg, we've been reasonably lucky at Glenelg. We've kept a pretty good core of players. There's always a few who tend to move back up into the AFL system or sort of retire. We haven't had. Uh, we've lost a few like Curran and Maxi Proud. I think called it a year. So we've had a few of the older heads sort of moving on. Luckily, the like our under 19 squad has been really strong. So I think there'll be a few of those kids will start to come up. We didn't lose them all to the draft this year, which is good. Um, it's always a bit tough, and it's always a nervous time period at this time because I feel like the last 5 years, especially not so much Glenelg, but South Adelaide, they sign a couple ruckmen every season, and then by the time it comes to the season start, their ruckmen have been drafted back up into the AFL level because AFL clubs have lost players in the preseason to injury, and then they use the supplementary period to
Mhm.
bring them in. So it's kind of like you don't. you don't count your squad until you get to round one.
Mm-hmm.
And then even then, a couple of years ago, we had Lockie Hosey doing fantastically. That would have been 2019, and he went in the mid-season draft to North Melbourne. So yeah, it's weird because you obviously you don't want to begrudge these guys to play at the highest level. I think it's fantastic that they get to, but on the other hand, you're like, okay, that leaves a big hole in the squad, and
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Yeah.
so it's interesting. And I find you tend to get behind the players um, who you can tell want to stay at the state level
Mm-hmm.
for whatever reason. But yeah, it's easy to get around them because you think you're going to be here for a few years now. So
Yeah.
yeah,
No,
I think I
makes
would have been around with that.
yeah, no, it happens. It makes sense. Again, like I said, the off season is so much different, and I agree with you. It's like you sit there and you can look at your list, and then a combination of injury, supplemental period, different things like that, and you just don't know how it's going to go. It could take a great season to a crap season, and it could change so many things. So it's the plight of the state league. Sometimes I feel sorry for because you can't really 100% say we're good because
Yeah,
at
no,
any time if one of your players is having a fantastic season, you get halfway through the year, well, then you get the mid-season draft. And your best
yep,
player could find themselves on an AFL list because the AFL has the Essendon Bombers have an injury in the midfield, and your best
that's
midfielder is
it.
the guy that they're looking for. So
That's it.
unfortunately it happens. So we'll step away from the negative, we'll go to the positive a little bit. And I love the anticipation of each season. And I in my questions I put expectations, but I kind of don't like the word call me the eternal optimist. I hate expectations because it makes you think that you expect something to happen, and you just never know. Again, state league footy is kind of a helter skelter at times. So, what are your thoughts going into next year for Glenelg? Do you think they move up the ladder a little bit? Do you think they potentially could have a shot for a grand final? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I reckon we're still definitely in the finals mix. I don't think we've lost players that will take us out of contention. Um, I am also an eternal optimist. We could have been drubbed every game last year. We could have had a season like West Adelaide. I think they didn't win for nearly 2 years or something, and I'd still be like, yeah, no, we'll do it this year. We'll do it this year. Uh, Probably you have to be an optimist to have followed Richmond for as long as I have as well. So that finally came good. But yeah, no, I think we're still in with the crack. A few of our guys are starting to get older, so I feel like it might be this year or next year's you know um,
Mm-hmm.
really need to make moves. But again, like you say, I mean, some team could be doing fantastically, and then yeah, their best mid gets up. Or a couple of years ago, Chris Curran, like the captain, he got a job opportunity in the Riverland, so every second week he was out of, he couldn't play. It's not like that just happens. So random kid in the background. Yeah, so
Sneaky kid in the background. No
that's
problem. Tell
it.
her she's getting her 15 minutes of fame when the podcast comes out.
She'll love that.
Not a problem at all. Oh, that is
uh,
fantastic. I love it. She goes, "Oh, shoot, zoom, right off." Love it. Absolutely love it.
she's a good kid. Yeah, no, so optimistic, but always optimistic.
There's nothing wrong with being optimistic as any kind of sport fan for sure. You always go into the start of the year going, you know what, we got a chance. We have a
We're gonna do
chance
it.
until game one, and then we'll see. So, all right, we jump from that. I guess it's a little bit of my American age. So many people talk about I can do a better job if you put me as the list manager or general manager. So I'm gonna let you have a little bit of fun. I'm gonna install you as the list manager for Glenelg Footy Club for one day. You can make one move and bring in any player from the SANFL to join Glenelg for next season. Who's the one person you bring in and why? It's a toughie, but a goodie. I love it.
That's really hard. Do you know what's really interesting? Is my first instinct was to say a player who actually retired a year ago, which is Joel Cross, who played for South Adelaide.
Mhm.
Still looks to be in pretty good nick from what I've seen when he's doing his commentary. So I'd almost like to bring him out of retirement because he was such an absolute hard nosed. I feel like South always used to get us, and it was always because he would just go up a notch.
Hmm.
Incredibly good player. I almost want to look at what the various. But okay, can I flip this around and can I answer this in the context of the women's team?
Sure, go ahead.
All right, I want Lauren Young from West Adelaide.
Awesome, awesome.
She will be a number one draft pick, or I will eat a football. She won the best and fairest when she was 15. I was like watching her play, just a ridiculous boot, ridiculous contested mark. Played like Matt Rowell did in his first couple of games for a whole season. Incredibly good player. So I'd get her down to the base in a heartbeat.
Oh boy, yeah, I guess we will definitely have to look and see when she finds her way onto either Port or Adelaide's
It'll be
lists.
Port. I think she's
It'll
in
be
Port's academy. So
it'll most likely be Port, which is good because I think that'd be fantastic. So, and actually,
that
this is a perfect lead in because you've already answered this question, but I'm still going to ask it. You support the women's because, as you said, daddy daughter. So, what were your thoughts on Glenelg's season this last year? Because again, with the women's competition, you don't have Port and Adelaide because of the way the seasons are set up
yeah.
currently. So, how was Glenelg's season last year? What were your kind of thoughts about that?
We got to finals, and then we didn't go. I can't remember when we bowed out because I think I missed the second final, or maybe I missed the first final because I was I had a hockey game on. But we did well. We've lost a couple players. I mean, as you lose them to the draft and stuff. I think was it this year or last where Brooke Tonnen went after like the first game she kicked like 6 goals or something like that, and then the very next game she got drafted up to Adelaide, which is always unfortunate. But all right, we get after the AFLW season finishes, which actually, if it's going to be running in August, we might get them all season. We would get Ed Marinoff and Caitlin Gould, who are fantastic players. And if we get them for a whole season, we're going to win the flag. So
It'll definitely be interesting to see if they play the full season because my gut tells me that I think that the AFLW and the AFL like this now playing right after the men's season slash use the kind of
mm,
that last bye week as the first week to kind of let the women have that first round 100% just them, no cricket, no nothing. I think it's here to stay. It'll definitely be
mm,
how the CBA goes. I'm very fascinated to see how that goes, especially now with a lot of talk that I'm seeing that both the men and the women are going to join when it comes to the AFL, which I
that would
think
be very
is
interesting. Yeah,
well, I don't think I think it's fantastic because
it'd
I
be
think
great.
it would show that the men and the women are equal or run on equal, and I think it's going to make the contract negotiations that much better both for the men and the women because I think not only will the women probably still keep the pay raise that they got through the 1 year CBA that they just signed, but I think it's going to push them closer and closer to being professionals, which I think for the
That's what we
detractors,
need. That's what
well,
we need.
and for the detractors, I think it's gonna shut them up much quicker because when these girls are only training, only playing and not having to worry about it, I think it's only going to be better. I think this competition is 7 years old and it's already progressing at an astronomical level. I've said this
Oh,
numerous times.
it's
This is
fantastic.
the growth area for the AFL that they've been dying for because if you
Oh
look
yeah.
at all of the states after the AFLW started in 2017, they have seen significant growth in youth women's football and teams. I saw one statistic in 2018, 2019 that certain states had 600% increase
Yep.
in women's players.
Yep.
If that doesn't tell you that this is a massive growth area, I don't know what to tell you. So
And
I
it didn't
one
fall off.
one
It didn't
hundred
fall off
percent agree.
either. And
Oh yeah.
I remember there was an article in the Advertiser where the guy who does the planning for the just the whole SA sort of football competition said we've run out of ovals. Like
Hmm.
we haven't got the space to fit all of the new teams that want to play. And he was basically like, "This is a fantastic problem and not
Hmm.
something I expected." But he's like, "We're going to have to start thinking outside the box." and yeah, it was, but yeah, it's absolutely fantastic. It's I mean, I helped run the Auskick sessions a few times for my kids' school and stuff like that. And yeah, participation rates through the roof. Watching the quality of the girls come through, like Hannah Ewings, Lauren Young, girls like
Hmm.
that, they are sublime footballers already. They've never stopped, like they've never put a footy down in their life.
Nope.
Uh, they are just going to be constantly hitting. I think the AFLW did the right thing by expanding to 18 teams now because they're going to need to be able to catch all of those players coming in. I think almost the sad thing is a lot of the established players now are going to quickly get pushed out because of the talent that's coming in. It's just there will still be a few obviously that you'll need to keep around, like more experienced heads and stuff. But the level of skill that's pushing up on the door now and is coming through in the next few years is phenomenal.
Well, and the other thing too is that you're going to have a kind of a stopgap year this year. If I hear correctly, this is going to be an overage. The next draft will be an overage draft. There will be no 18-year-old schoolgirls in this next draft, which I think is a good thing, because you've got state league players that are dying to play AFLW, and because of these 18-year-olds stepping in, they're not going to get their opportunities. So this is going to test list managers. And I think it's going to give opportunities for state league players that they just need that chance. And
Yes.
I think you're 100% there. I think this is absolutely fantastic. I cannot wait for the AFLW, the SANFL W, the Waffle W, because I think all of these leagues are just growing. Even the VFLW, all of them, I think, are just growing. This is a great opportunity, and I love being part of the support early in it because I really love to do it. So
Yep.
we'll jump from that to you've already kind of mentioned it a couple of times. Your AFL side is Richmond, same color scheme, so absolutely love that. My Central Districts person who I chatted with was the same way. Central Bulldogs, Western Bulldogs, so absolutely perfect. So was that basically the reason that you were a Glenelg fan, is because of the Richmond Tigers, or was it something else?
It's kind of, well, both in the other way. Yeah, I had friends who were played for Kybe, which was yellow and black.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, I just like the color scheme. I like the song. All of that kind of contributed. I guess you could say I sort of co-supported the two things. Yeah, obviously Dave Bradley, guy that I sort of knew, played for Glenelg. Other people from the southeast because of being their recruiting zone
Mm-hmm.
played for them. So it's kind of a holistic thing where it would have happened at the same time, and it was just, yeah,
Gotcha.
there was no friction for me, I guess, going for one and the other.
That's fantastic. I'll throw this question in just because. Do you keep an eye on the Richmond women's team? Because I'll sit here and
Oh
tell you this
yes.
right now: of the AFLW teams that I have thoroughly loved watching, and I'm a Swan supporter, but the Tigers are one of those teams I'm keeping an eye on because Mon Conti, Ellie McKenzie, Grace Egan this last year were a three-headed monster. I thoroughly enjoyed watching the Richmond Tigers this year, and I've
Oh
said they
yeah.
are my Smoky in the next 3 years to be a flag contenders because they're young, they're talented, and they're hungry.
Oh yeah. I hope so. Getting whoever's idea it was to get Grace Egan in, that's what we
It was
needed to
Grace's
release
because I
Conti.
guess I guess she was in a Richmond Academy in the
She
she
was,
had.
that's right. And
Yep.
then yeah, she which yeah, she's what we needed to release Conti, and that just
Mhm.
took us to the next level this year. Having both the Hoskings, I think, was a hilarious stroke. They add like a bit of a fabric to the club. Uh, yeah, they played with. I feel like the club as a whole is playing with the same DNA. Like the Richmond, the men's team and the women's team both
Hmm.
play that sort of manic, all
High
out,
pressure. Hmm.
high pressure, chaos, but chaos with the, and then it's got that smooth edge every so often where it just, yeah, no, yeah, you're absolutely right. It's, and I think we're going to take a big step. We already took a massive step getting to finals. I reckon we can go better.
Well, and think about this: Harriet Cordner is still to come back from her ACL tear. And I
And
think she
Beck
is a
Miller,
massive piece. Beck Miller stepped up last year. Elise Sharon steps in this last year and becomes an all Australian halfback out of nowhere.
where did we pull her from? West, somewhere in Sydney?
New South Wales Sydney competition. In fact,
Yeah.
I've communicated with some people that coached her up in New South Wales, and I jokingly said when I found out she was New South Wales, I said Sydney and GWS should be calling her night and day to get her back to. But honestly, with the story of how she became a Richmond player, the fact that she bought a car and there was a CD in there, and the only song on that CD was the Richmond
I
theme
love
song.
that.
It is destiny. So I don't think she'll ever
Oh,
find her way back to New
absolutely.
South Wales until Richmond is done having her there. I think she's been an absolute wonder signing. Like I said, Richmond is a team. Like I said, I am a diehard Swan supporter, but Richmond is a team I love watching because they are absolutely fascinating. They're my team of the future. Honestly, them and the Duggies have young rosters with a lot of talent that I think watch out.
How?
Yes, you've got your Adelaides, you've got your Brisbanes, you've got
Yeah,
your Melbournes, but they are
they're
teams
gonna
that
fall
are
off soon.
aging. They are aging
How is Mon Conti still in the 22 under 22? That blows my mind every year
because
that happens.
just because of the fact she's absolutely elite. I love watching her play. Her and Scott Pendlebury are
Mm.
so similar. It's scary. They get the ball in their hands, and it's like time slows
They
down
get an extra
because
half a second somehow, don't they? It's
it is insane. And maybe it's their basketball, maybe it's the quick reflexes for basketball. I don't know, but it's absolutely outstanding. So now that we've had our AFL section, which I absolutely love, I've got a couple of fun ones for this. The first one is that being an AFL fan, a Richmond supporter, the grand final for the AFL found its first ever time outside of Victorian soil in 2020 and 2021 due to the pandemic. But I was surprised to hear Victorian media starting to kind of bring up the discussion of the grand final maybe becoming a traveling grand final. And again, I've told the comment section almost every video that I've done this when I ask this question. Calm down. I know about the 50-year contract. You don't have to bring it up. I know about it. This is pie in the sky, hugely. What are your thoughts on this? Are you somebody that you like the idea that maybe potentially a grand final could find its way onto the Adelaide Oval surface? Or do you like the tradition that it being at the MCG with 100,000 people able to go?
I I wouldn't mind it traveling. I'd have no problem with that. I guess the flip side of this is because I'm not a Victorian.
Mhm.
And apart from supporting Richmond, I find Victorians to be absolutely Victorian. So to put it nicely.
I'm chuckling because you're not the first person to say that, and I go back and forth with Victorians, SA, WA, New South Queensland, even Northern Territories,
Oh,
and it's fascinating to me. Like I said, that the interesting interstate discussions between especially SA and Victoria is gold at times.
they try to steal everything of ours that isn't nailed down. I tell you. No, it's yeah, it's I wouldn't mind seeing it travel. I feel like if it did, it would probably struggle. I'm not sure how they would do it in terms of rostering it and rotating it, because I still feel like you would probably want it at the MCG more often than not. But just from like the size of the ground and the number of people you get in there. But I guess one of the loudest games I've ever been to personally was the 2018 SANFL Grand Final, and that was between North and it was the same as this year, North and Norwood, and that was exciting because it was like a split 50-50 split fan base. So I guess if you can get the people traveling, then there's no reason why you couldn't. Yeah, I'd be for it, I guess, because I mean, then it might come to Adelaide Oval, I could go.
That'd be fantastic. In fact, a great transition here is that technically SA gets a little bit of a first time experience this year with the
Oh,
AFL stealing the Magic Round idea and calling it Gather Round, which I think is absolutely. Don't get me started on the name. I'm wondering where they got the name from, besides the pen. But honestly, I'm interested to know as an SA person, what do you think of Gather Round, and do you plan on going to any games, considering all 18 clubs in the AFL are going to find themselves in South Australia?
I will be going to all 9 games. I've already got tickets to all games. I'm going to make it
Holy
work
shnikes.
somehow. Yeah,
I'm going to want pictures at each of the games for proof.
yeah. No, I well, it's what I want to do. So, and I've decided that I'm going to for the ones that have overlaps, I'm basically going to make a call at 3/4 time as to whether I stay with the game that's going or leave early to get to the start of the next one.
Mhm.
Oh, that'll happen on the 14th is the Freo Suns game at Norwood, followed by the Richmond Swans game,
Mhm.
which I'm very happy about because the 14th is my birthday, so fantastic birthday present. Um, and incidentally, so I'm a Richmond member, a long-time Richmond member. I also have two other AFL memberships, which is the Suns and Freo,
Mhm.
for different reasons. So that'll be like my full on member day. Yeah, I'm going to try and get to all the games. It's I love footy in any form. Like I can quite happily watch an AFL game, a SANFL game, a game down at the local oval in the Adelaide comp, country game. I watch the JAFL, like the Japan AFL games. I watch US AFL games. I love the game. So for me, having the 9 games here, yeah. When else am I going to get to go to 9 AFL games in a weekend? So yeah, I'm committed every game. I love it.
That is awesome. Like I said, I want picture proof. I want a picture from each of the games for sure. So I'll make sure and reach out to
Oh
you on
yeah,
on Twitter for that because I want to see where you're sitting at each of the games. So
I'll do my best.
oh, that's fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. So I've told this in all of my episodes is that I have not been to Australia. It is on my bucket list. It is something that I plan on doing. So I'm doing a little bit of research. So when I do come down, I'm ready. So I got two questions to ask you, sir. As an American, we love our food at our sporting events. So I got to ask, what's your go-to food when you go to the footy?
Uh, well, I'm a pretty traditional pie with sauce kind of guy. But before the game, I go to Cafe Billy's and I have a pie floater, which is it's a more of a South Australian thing where you basically have a bowl of pea and ham soup or pea
Mhm.
soup, and then you stick a meat pie in the soup, and then you cover it with tomato sauce, and that's a pie floater. It is on a cold day, it's the best thing. Then at the footy, beer, pie, free chocks, donut, perhaps that sort of stuff. That's my footy food.
Alrighty. And then when it comes to it, I gotta know where is your most ideal place to sit when you go to the
Mm.
footy?
Yeah, so if you watch any of the games at Glenelg Oval, on the opposite side from the grandstand, it's got like a big grassy hill. So I'll be sitting pretty much in the pocket on the far side, have my picnic blanket out or my camping chair. That's where I'll be parked.
Fantastic. All right. Last question that I have for you, and I love this because I always get tons of different answers. And sometimes I even try to find these games to see if I can find any coverage. Favorite game of footy you have ever seen live on the telly at the ground, doesn't matter. Wins, women's, doesn't matter. Favorite game of footy you have ever seen.
Oh, yeah, that's really hard.
If you need more than one, I'll allow
Yeah, all right. Well, I guess
it.
to get the easy ones out of the way, the 2021 SANFL Grand Final, the Glenelg one. There's footage of me. If you look up Ed Marinoff's goal in the last quarter, a guy who's waving his flag gets the top knocked off his flag. That's me because my mate waved his flag, intercepted mine. The 2019 Sample Grand Final, the 3 Richmond Grand Finals, just watching them on the telly.
Mhm.
Obviously, I didn't get to go. Uh, Interestingly, the 2016 game, you probably know against the Swans, Sam Lloyd goal after the siren.
Mhm.
We were having
That's
such,
after we're done, I'll tell you a funny story about that. After we're done with the podcast off
yeah,
mic, I'll tell you a funny story about that game.
but yeah, that was I was very much that was a bad year for us, but I was quite, and we lost the game against Collingwood in round 2, I think, basically after the siren or on the siren, the Grundy call. And it was funny because my wife had just came home for that game, and I was basically on the floor hitting the ground in frustration. And then a few weeks later, Sam Lloyd kicked that one after the siren. It was just, yeah, massive emotional release from that. It was quite good. But oh, okay, yeah, no, all right. Number one best game, 2017, the first final where we beat Geelong. Me and two other of my Richmond supporter mates, we went up to the pub up in the hills in Adelaide. We were watching the game. We hadn't beaten Geelong for like a decade. We hadn't been in finals. We hadn't won a final for, a decade and a half. And it was tight. It was tight. It was tight. And then in the third quarter, we started to get away. And then in the fourth quarter, we just went. And it was a fantastic, we were celebrating. And I remember about 10 minutes after the game finished, this guy comes and he walks into the pubs. It's like 11:30 at night. And he's wearing a full Richmond gear. It's this old guy. And he just says, he goes, I just had to be with some people. I just had to find some people. And so
I
we're just
love
like,
it.
yeah. So we had a beer at a celebration. And then the guy who owned the pub, he's like, look, boys, he's like, I want to shut up the sports bar. I got to go home. But he's like, I'll put the replay on in the pokies room, in the gaming room, if you want to go in there. So I reckon I was out till about 5:30 in the morning. We watched the game about 3 times. Yeah, intense night. And just that whole release of like, we won a final. Like, that monkey was off the back. And from there, it was like, well, who really cares from there? Like, but yeah. Oh, that was a great night.
Fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. Well, Berg, this has been a fantastic conversation. Again, I love learning about the SANFL and the connection between Glenelg and Richmond for you has been absolutely fantastic. And your love of women's footy, sir, I thank you. I thank you. I love meeting gentlemen like you that are just like me that absolutely adore the women's footy and are fully supportive. I greatly, greatly appreciate it. So thank you for hopping on the podcast today.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been fantastic.
All righty, all righty, ladies and gentlemen, that is going to do it for another episode in the off-season supporter series. Keep an eye out; there are more to come. Waffle, SANFL, VFL, and AFL fans are going to chat. We are going to get to March until the footy season is back, and then we are full good to go. We'll be back again very soon with another episode. Good night.